This is a dangerous groups that we're dealing with now. It was a nightmare.
2807, you're clear for landing, runway 7, Bravo. All personnel report to the nearest tornado shelter. This is not a drill.
If you need help, then dial your operator.
Have no fear, fellow citizens. The Mediator is here.
Good morning and welcome to this week's edition of The Mediator with me, your host, Brian West, here to give you the top 8 headlines and developing news stories that made in this week. Now, as usual, I'll give you the top 8 local headlines and developing news stories that made in first, followed by a movie clip, a skit, a trailer, or something that's going on in the community, or maybe some pictures. And then I'll give you the top 8 international headlines and developing news stories that made in this week. So let's waste no time, folks. Let's get to it. Story number 1, Boardman School Board adds 2 new people. Boardman Schools will bring on Edward Adams as Supervisor of Digital Instructions and Brian Fonderland as Director of Operations and Human Resources. Each new team member has experience in the school district and look to continue to strive for excellence in Boardman Schools. Period. That's why the story made it in this week. Story number 2. Fire departments may want a piece of COVID-19 relief money. They want a piece of the pie. Many local fire departments, including Canfield, are not happy with the way relief money has been spent, especially when it comes to smaller communities. Local fire departments have been very, very busy and are voicing their concerns about local COVID-19 relief spending. Responding to about 2,300 calls last year, Canfield Fire Chief Don Hutchinson apparently is not happy with receiving only $28,000 while other districts receive more in relief funds. Now, overall, he feels that state officials overlooked fire districts, period. Now, this is what's keeping the story alive. Now, the importance of keeping firefighters and other public workers happy is also what got this story in. Story number 3, police levy up in Canfield. The police levy, taxes. Canfield residents want to fund the police. $3.9 million is the number, with an annual cost of $783,750 for a new Canfield police levy. Now, the local eyes will be on this small community. They'll be looking at the story in the fall to see if they decide to vote yes or no on this new levy to keep their police department intact. Canfield. Now, the levy would help maintain vehicles and other equipment. It will also provide needed funds to account for police department salaries. So everybody will be kind of biting their nails to see how this works out. Canfield Police especially, and that's why story number 3 made it in this week. Story number 4, local lawsuits making headlines. Lawsuits are nothing new locally, but Youngstown seems to have its hands full with the chill can factory. Now, this is in a $2.8 million lawsuit. That's a lot of money. Now, the city is trying to recoup $1.5 million in water and wastewater funds and $414,948 that it spent to acquire 15 properties. They went all out for this company. Now, in what seems like a failed venture, the city also lost $575,000 in income tax revenue. Now, what is keeping this story alive is current pending lawsuits. Story number 5, creativity may save the local market. After COVID-19 exposed the finances of many local businesses, owners are finding creative ways to stay in the game. After some shortfalls, Lordstown Motors opened the doors to potential investors. They opened them up, let them in. The company allowed visitors to come in and take a ride in the prototype battery-powered Endurance. One local Vindicator article says that the company allowed investors, auto analysts, potential customers, and media outlets to engage with company executives by giving them a tour of the plant before production starts on the Endurance in September. Now, this article is just one example of how businesses, local businesses, are getting very creative to stay relevant and attract outside support. Story number 6, the ripple effect of the lockdowns. Just over a year ago, the state went into lockdown mode, limiting the ability of what patrons and businesses can and could and couldn't do back then, and now it's can and can't do. Now, with the restrictions being lifted, now may be the right time to assess the damage that has been done after the aftermath of all COVID. Now that we're in recovery mode, the state is now trying to get back to business as usual, but it's coming at a cost because of a worker shortage and the simple fact that investors are trying to maintain confidence in the market, even in all of the recovery and chaos and talks of recessions and depressions. Now, the ripple effect of lockdowns at the moment is causing a push for local businesses to and residents to recover financially. So people are trying to recover financially, but with inflation on the rise, it will be tough. Story number 7 in the top 2 local headlines and developing news stories that made in this week. Virus cases have been declining locally. It's good news. Now, as of now, the vaccination plan seems to be working somehow. Sometimes not, so sometimes. Ohio has been on a streak of declining COVID-19 cases, sitting at below the 500 mark. That's the last time I checked. Now, around this time last year, if you take it back, the state was in panic mode while enduring massive shutdowns with many local hospitals at full capacity. So there's a big difference now versus then. That's about 46% of the state has been vaccinated, according to some numbers, and the number has been held steady. So we're not at the 50% mark yet. The fact now is that even with the virus still lingering around, people have stopped wearing masks, and there really is no way to tell if they're infected unless someone is showing symptoms or gets tested to see if they have the virus. Or you could just use what conspiracy gurus are talking about, the cell phone trick. See how that plays out. Story number 8 in the top local headline and developing news story that made it this week. Through the fire, through the limit, through the wall. Oh, just to be at the top, I gladly risk it all. Oh, just gotta let it out. Story number 8, crime still remains a top concern locally, especially with these rising homicide rates. Local mayors and leaders made headlines voicing their concerns about stopping recent crime waves. Youngstown is just one of many cities that have been seeing a spike in crime. Now, at the moment, guns are at the center of this growing issue. Area leaders feel that if they can somehow tackle the gun problem, they could possibly get a handle on the slight spike in violent crimes that have spread throughout local communities. Current talks with Governor Mike DeWine and other area leaders are currently taking place and keeping this story in the news. You know, I guess they're putting forth the effort, so they get an A+ on that. At least they're trying, and that's why Celebrate is such a big headline. You're seeing Democrats and Republicans come together, shaking hands, smiling at the camera locally, and that's always a good sign that peace is in the air. Well, those are our top 8 local headlines and developing news stories that I made this week. I'll be right back with the top 8 international headlines and developing news stories, so don't go anywhere. You're in the Mediator. Me, Brian West. I'll be right back.
Tune in and don't forget to subscribe to Method 8 Inc. YouTube channel. You can also watch free public entertainment. And don't forget to show some support by visiting www.method8inc.com by buying something, clicking something, watching something, or just reading something. You can also sponsor a program as well. That's www.method8inc.com.
Welcome back. Welcome back. Now it's time to get to the top 8 international headlines and developing news stories that made in this week. I'll tell you this story. I had just developed this time machine. I feel this is important. I went back through time and about 1,000, 2,000 or so years ago, and I came across the Independence War first when everybody was fighting for their independence, and I stepped in between everybody. I said, stop it! Stop it! We've got to stop the fighting! And somebody looked at me and shot me right in the leg. Oh, I got shot in the leg. And I had to press my emergency button. And I took a trip to the present. And now that we're coming upon Independence Day, I found myself a little confused. And I said, are we still, in my speeches to myself that I sometimes do when I'm in a room by myself, I said, are we still fighting for independence? I traveled all the way through time to stop and put an end to the violence and chaos and see a need for mediation, the process of peace. But I found out that even history has a purpose. And in our quest to save and keep the Constitution alive, I wondered, is the fight for independence still alive? It's a frightening story. But I did it for the sake of all mankind. And that's my story. And I'm sticking to it. So let's get to it, folks. Let's get to it. Story number 1. Countries are doing a lot to win wars. The fight for independence. UN reports that over 8,500 children were used as soldiers and nearly 2,700 were killed, according to a CNN report. Now, the detailed report says that 19,379 children were involved in about 21 conflicts, violating certain rules of war and engagements. Somalia, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Afghanistan, Syria, and Yemen were all listed in the report. This report clearly shows what desperate countries are doing to win wars, and that is why it made it in this week. Story number 1. What people do to win wars. Now, we're coming up on Independence Day, so you can just look at the history now, the present day. We have brothers and sisters as Americans coming together in peace and happiness. You'll see the celebration of Independence Day taking place, and you will wonder what we as a people in present day, will do to keep the spirit alive. And that's why story number 1 made it in this week. Story number 2. Could America get sucked back into Middle Eastern conflicts, or are we already in too deep? We're still over there, still trying to send ambassadors and develop peaceful relations. A report surfacing about the Taliban gaining more ground in Afghanistan has made some headlines. Now, this is after the United States downsized its presence in the region. A lot of people are working very hard. I have to stress this. They're working very hard in the Middle East to limit the escalation of more conflict, more violence, more war, more killing. It's just savagery when you see this stuff taking place, and it's bad news. Israel has also been in the headlines in some of these stories because this is after a war broke out in the region with them and the Palestinians. Now, the number of people that have been killed in Middle Eastern conflicts is off of the charts. Now, this is interior and exterior people from many different nations, many different countries. Now, if you even go into Africa, more deeper into Africa, you will see conflicts still to this day with how things have been taking place with their land and the Europeans. And now that when you migrate into that Middle Eastern area, you'll see that there are still conflicts that pop up every day in these regions. And that's why story number 2 made in this week. When you have rich land that has a lot of things going on, a lot of value, gold, oil, and that's why there's always conflicts when you see the land. They call it booty in the Bible. Booty. When you got a lot of booty, you create a lot of war. That's poetry. Story number 3. Certain stories that draw doubts about the COVID vaccine. Reports of blood clots and how the vaccine could affect the long-term health of teens have made headlines. 4,000 fully vaccinated people in Massachusetts have tested positive for the COVID-19 virus, according to a Fox News report. Now, this is after they were vaccinated. 4,000 people. That number could be startling. Now, this is all while officials make a nationwide effort to get people vaccinated. So you understand how this story made it in, because there's some confusion inside of the vaccination process. The vaccine is supposed to be stopping the virus. Trust is what's keeping this story alive. People trusting the government, trusting the doctors. Now, and that is what got this story in this week. That one simple word, trust. Do you trust your healthcare workers? Do you trust them with your life? Do you trust the government? And many people will possibly say no. And that's why story number 3 is so important. Story number 4, environmentalists and the pipeline projects. Big headline. Climate activism is keeping the Keystone XL Pipeline alive. They're keeping these stories alive. Climate activists and people trying to advocate for this pipeline. Now, in a push to save the environment, activists seem to be killing innovation and jobs. They don't want more environmental harm done. Now, there are some pros and cons in this story. One of them is the standard of living, and for a nation to be energy independent, you have to explore energy options, especially when it's in your own neck of the woods. Now, this story has two sides fighting over these pros and cons. Now, there are pros to saving the environment, and one of them is health. But you need heat to stay warm in the winter, and that is provided by fossil fuels. Now, dark money is also an issue in this story because people are funneling money in different ways. And usually when they come into town, some people say they don't put it where it needs to be. Now, land is also a top concern in this story. Because when you get these oil fields, sometimes you have to push people off of their land. Now, that's bad. Now, this story will definitely stay alive, and there will be a need for mediators, because there is something in it for each side, for everybody. The environmentalists, you keep the land, you keep nature going. But for the oil companies, you get heat, you heat a house, you live comfortably. That's a good deal. Now, a story by Fox News, mainly geared towards the left, points out some interesting facts about stopping the Keystone Oil Pipeline project, which is keeping this story alive. Now, somehow this story is gaining steam again due to Joe Biden's policies. So that's why story number 4 made in this week. Well, those are our top 4 international headlines and developing news stories that I made this week. I'll be right back with the top 4. So don't go anywhere. You're the Mediator with me, Brian West. I'll be right back. If you want to check out the stories that almost made it in or did make it in, go to our Twitter feed on our website. Check out everything. All of the sources are there. And go to the website. It's method8inc.com. Method8inc.com, where you can buy something, click on something, watch something, read something, or just sponsor a program. Welcome back. Now it's time to get to the top 4 international headlines and developing news stories that made in this week. I was at a party one time, and I remember it like it was yesterday. Song it just came on, Juvenile. Girl, you look good. Won't you back that thing up? You's a big fine woman. Won't you back that thing up? You gotta rip it up, yeah. Wanna blab, yeah. Make it. Wanna blab, yeah. Wanna blab, yeah. Oh, that's when I knew it. I seen the girl of my dreams. Woo! I went over to her, and she said she was fighting for her independence. She didn't want to talk to me. I said, baby, come on. You got what I need. Her head started spinning around. Brother, I told you I'm fighting to stay independent. It was deceiving. At that moment, I knew the value of independence. They want to buy their own things. They want to love their own things. They want to stay in their own corner. And if you try to unite with them, anyone who's fighting for their independence, there's a good chance that you won't succeed. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Let's get to it. Story number 5. Could the justice and prison system be another ticking time bomb? Freedom! Something is brewing in the field of justice reform, and prison inmates are finding ways to voice what has been going on inside of the prison system for years. They're finding ways to get the word out, warn the next generation from mice and a large amount of abuse reported. Prisoners are saying that they have a voice and they have some rights in all of this fighting. Now, this report came out of Australia, but some reports have been quietly surfacing about U.S. prison systems also. Now, in a movement gaining steam about justice reform, America is a big piece of this puzzle because America has been leading the way for years. In Australia, 200 staff and 420 inmates are being transferred due to inhumane conditions. Growing stories about police brutality are also keeping this story alive. Justice reform. One simple fact is that you can't have one without the other. That means you can't have the police without criminals, and you can't have criminals fighting for justice without police. So somewhere, somehow, somebody is going to have to be in the middle, and that's why story number 5 is so important, and that's why I made it in this week. Whew. Frightening story. Story number 6. Harris and the migration crisis. This is a big story. Happy Harris, she is always excited. I want everybody to just relax. I've been at the border. You don't have to do anything. I've been there. That's Harris, Kamala Harris. She's a good woman. At least that's what her supporters are saying. She'll get it done. Just give her some time. A lot of time. 56 House Republicans, according to a Fox News report, want Biden to remove Harris from a leading role on the migration crisis. So they want her removed. Now, at the moment, they are accusing her of inaction. I think last time I checked, it was 90-something days since they've been counting since she's been asked, or they want her to visit the border. So we'll see how this works out. Now, there has also been a push for her to go to the border in these 91 days of asking if she's been to the border. Harris's defense at the moment seems to be going straight to the source. She says she's going straight to the source to see what the problem is. So she's going to visit the leaders and she's going to try to solve it from the root. But only time will tell how this story develops. Now, in the midst of a power struggle and political chaos, the number of migrants in custody and after fleeing across the border remains high, and not too many people have a solution. But Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, through it all, he says that they have a strategy, and this is why the story made it in this week. Because Alejandro Mayorkas says that it's going to be all right. They've got it under control. We'll see how this works out, and that's why I made it this week. Story number 6, big headline. Story number 7 in the top 2 international headlines and developing news stories that made it this week. I think you need something. You need information. You need a story. That's what you need. I found that out last night. I went to bed. And I woke up. Nobody told me a story before I went to bed. I had to find a story. And this is what's going to keep you going. And that's why it's time to get to the top 2 stories I made this week. Just for you. Just for you. I got something. Story number 7. Inflation fears are very high at the moment. This story could affect you. Economists are having a lot of meetings lately because they're figuring out what can and can't be done. Inflation fears are real, and they're keeping a lot of people up at night. Perspectives are changing by the day, and the topic of discussions that are taking place in this story is showing people some interesting facts about money and how government decisions can hurt and harm our pocketbooks, no matter if we're rich or middle class or even poor. Now, another interesting discovery taking place in this story is what can and cannot work when the government decides to tax high earners or cut taxes. So there's 2 sides going on in the story. Now, at the moment, the only way to combat inflation in the end will be decided by trade policies, interest rates, and how fast the world can recover from COVID-19. So story number 7 is a big headline that we have to keep an eye on, because if prices is rising, you know, I just got to get some new ties. I'll try to look as decent as I can to host this show. And if I have to result in toilet paper rolls and a tissue shirt, then that means that I have hit rock bottom. But I'm gonna try my best to keep it going and keeping this show alive. And that's why story number 7 made it to top this week. Inflation. Big headline. Story number 8. The top international headline and developing news story that made in this week. Ooh, I'm dancing through them. Ooh, slide to the left. Almost out of here. Backtracking what COVID-19 has done already. Inflation, political backbiting, scarce resources, shutdowns, vaccine shortages, economic downsliding, forced vaccination concerns, healthcare issues, more and more paperwork. The list goes on and on. The list goes on and on. That's the key word. Because the list of what COVID-19 has done to the lives of ordinary Americans and the world seems to be getting bigger, longer. It's getting longer. Through it all, over 600,000 people have lost their lives, and more people are losing their minds due to what seems like a failed state in the battle against COVID-19. In the aftermath, the case count is now the biggest concern, and the mystery behind if the vaccine is actually working is also in this mix. That is the main reason why this story got bumped up to the top this week, because even while everybody's going out conversating, hugging and showing love, the virus is still around. The invisible enemy. Everyone in this story wants to know if we're winning the COVID game or not. And with still a slow labor market and the death count sitting over 600,000, the seriousness of this virus is still lingering around, and it's what's keeping this story alive. It's almost like playing a game. How do you defeat something that you can't see? Do you work out, strengthen your immune system, drink orange juice, drink immune strengthening vitamins and all that other stuff? How do you win this COVID-19 fight? Woo, frightening story. That's why I made it to the top this week. Well, those are our top 8 local headlines and international headlines and developing news stories that I made this week. I hope you got something out of today's program. I always get something out of doing the research, like I like to do every week. I like to thank all the news outlets, the media, the journalists, the people on the front lines. You deserve all the credit. I'm just the media, the man in the middle. If you want to show some support, it doesn't take much. If you want to help me invest in some new ties, all you have to do is visit the website on the screen, buy something, click on something, watch something, read something, or just sponsor a program. I hope you have a good week. Stay sane, be safe for the holiday. Don't do anything that I wouldn't do. And you know, I'm as safe as this can be. If I'm lighting a firecracker, I'm going to light it away from the children in a nice, wide open area, and I'm going to watch it explode, and I'm going to put ear covers on, and I'm going to put sunglasses on. I'm just kidding. I'm going to watch it explode and hope it doesn't blow up the neighborhood, because I am only human. But try to practice safety out there. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. Next week I'll be back on the 4th of July, going through over 200 or more stories just for you, to keep you informed. Have a good week, everybody. Thank you for tuning to the Mediator with me, Brian West. Peace.
If you need help, then dial your operator.
Have no fear, fellow citizens. The Mediator is here.